So today we've got a Midland 76900 base station, and this has come in because it doesn't work properly, and that's because some Wally has 80 channeled it, which of course has made it an illegal radio. You cannot expand UK 2781 channels, and when I have seen these that even work, it's never successful. No, never one I've seen anyway. So it's going to be a lot of work, isn't it? Because you just don't know what's been done till we go inside it. So I'm going to open it up, and he did say retain the blue LEDs. Okay. So when I open it up, obviously there's this stupid board that's got to come out. But that aside, on the power supply, a capacitor down there which is receding. We'll probably change that, and we'll probably change that as well, because they all look not very good. So we'll start with getting these wires off. Now they look like original wires that have been cut, so I'll unsolder those ones. And that can go in the vertical filing cabinet. Right, I'll get into it, and we'll start by hopefully getting the wiring off there. Right, so the first thing we are going to do is I'm going to do this second, but we'll change that 13 amp fuse for a 3 amp one. But in the meantime, we will just test it like this. Now I've changed the capacitor there, which was dodgy by the looks of it. Changed the capacitor there that looked very dodgy. I didn't want to plug it in with that one in place. I've taken that board out. Hopefully we've put some links back underneath. It's had a different channel selector switch in. I don't know why. Perhaps the other one failed. Perhaps it was for some naughty reason. But there we go. We'll plug it in. I mean, this radio has been more or less working. So I'm going to kind of test it as it's come. Well, then if we can get it to actually work. We'll worry about the SINAD reading in a moment. I'll just find out how to switch it on. There we go. We'll need a mic. Not sure whether we've got one on the bench. No, that's a 5-pin DIN. I'll have to go and find one. Right, well, we've got channel 20 on the signal generator, and it is receiving, and it is also transmitting. Well, transmitting on... it's transmitting. I wonder if the VCO is on the edge of lock. What's it doing then? Slightly high on frequency, because this may be different to what it was because of the phase lock loop chip faff. So I tell you what, we'll do that immediately. 2779125 it should be. Actually, I mean, that wasn't out of spec, but obviously we're going to sort that out if I can find the trimming tool. Trouble with the radio this size, it hides my tools. There we go, 2779126, that'll do me nicely. So I think what we'll do, we'll get a piece of paper and we'll write down that it was TX was 277915 4.2 or something like that, but we've corrected that to 27.79126, just one above. It's got a bit of time, a bit of leeway to drop them, which is what they do naturally. So let's see what power it's doing. So on the 3 watt scale it's banging across. On the 4 watt scale we've got 3.5 watts. I'll be checking the power supply. I think we're going to change that capacitor anyway. It's silly to have a radio come all this way for repair and not spend £3.50 or whatever they cost. If I could manage to find the ESR meter, let's just have a look at the 2 capacitors I've taken out. I mean, they probably work fine, but the fact that the heat shrink is starting to recede, you know, it is indicative of imminent failure. So let's have a look at that one. This is the one out of the back of the radio. Yeah, 220. I mean, that's fine. But let's have a look at the other one. This is the one out of the power supply that really did start to look dodgy. This is supposed to be 100 microfarads. 110, yeah, I mean that still works, but thing is those could pack up, and they're dead cheap, 48 pence and 16 pence, something like that. So let's have a look at what the sensitivity is like on this radio. To be honest, it doesn't sound very nice to me. It sounds harsh. So receive. I need to plug the instruments into the extension speaker socket. And on these radios you switch to extension speaker. Right, so we'll adjust the attenuator till we get 12 decibel SINAD. So we'll go over to SINAD meter. Oh, good grief, that's dropped these case screws on the floor. Well, there's one thing, if we don't find them, we'll get brand new ones. Right, where were we? Yes, attenuator. I mean that's excellent. But the chassis can sometimes produce slightly better results. So it is 0.33 microvolts for 12 dB SINAD. I don't think we'll be improving on that. That's excellent. It just sounds a bit harsh. Right, let's see where we are with this power supply. I'm going to have to then tidy up this wiring. The high frequency filter switch they've used to power up the illegal modification, so I'll try and tidy that up for him. Whether or not we can bring back the function of that switch is another matter. So clearly the output is going to be there. It's 13.3. Is that chassis? So really we want that to be 13.8. Not easy to get to. Now I'm going to just key up and just see whether that drops much. tell you what, before we proceed, we'll change that capacitor. What I don't want to do is to go through a tune-up and then have to retune it because the capacitor's changed what we're getting. Right, so that's changed to power supply capacitor. So that's the one that's come out, which looks to be Panasonic. 85 degrees. That's replaced with 105 degree. No, it's an 85 degree one, the same. 2225 volts. It's probably right on the edge. We've got 50 volts in there, and one of the advantages is that the new component is the same size as the old component, so it fits in the same holes, which is why we buy the bigger one. One of the reasons we buy a bigger voltage. And this is an RS1 744 1152. I will just test this, it probably works fine, but again, this is all precautionary while they're coming in for service. Certain parts are going to be iffy at this age, which is 38, 39 years old. I'll just short that out onto the chassis just in case there's something still in it. That is low. So I'm glad we've changed that. Right, so we'll switch that power supply back on. If I can find the switch. We'll check that voltage again. So yeah, it's come up now, hasn't it? It was 13.76 or something, so it has altered a little bit. So I'll just put that. I'm being really over the top with this, but so we're at 13.76. What's it on transmit? 13.71. So you haven't got that voltage drop that we had before when you're going to transmit. So without any further adjustment, now we've changed those two capacitors in the power supply, shall we have a look at what we have got, if I can find the remote, on the power meter. So it was it 3.5 watts? It was 3.5 watts. Switch the external speaker off. Why are we getting feedback? Anyone know? Well, it doesn't do it once you've unplugged that. 3.5 watts, exactly the same. So it's not made any difference to power, but sometimes it can. So we'll go through, we won't do that, but we'll do the VCO first. And as ever, I'll have to dig the service manual out because I have a memory like a sieve. And you know what, I always have had, so it's not just my age. So we'll use the Roto 240 manual. We do actually have the manual for this, the full manual. And if I decide to do that switch, restore it back to its original function, I've got so much. I've started this at 8 o'clock on Saturday evening because I didn't think I'd got 2 church services tomorrow with me being a church organist. I thought I got 1, so I only took this on knowing that I'd got all Sunday afternoon to do this because this could have been problematic, and it hasn't been so far. And then blow me, I've got a Harvest Festival to do, which I'd failed to look at the diary over. So we need to be on channel 40 for a start. Yeah, and it's not. Now then, look at that. It's not doing. Can you see the meter just hover, hover, hover? It's not locking. So it now has come in. Like second press, it's come in. So it sounds like the VCO's out. And I'm not surprised after having that silly board in it. So it's the far side of resistor 4, and what are we looking for? On receive it's supposed to be 4 volts. So we'll adjust the coil. For around about 4 volts. Set the radio to transmit and adjust the trimmer capacitor for 4 volts. So now we'll go back to receive, 3.99, transmit, 4, 3.99, 4, and it's keying up every time, as you can see. So now we'll go to channel 1. I'll just check, I think it's 1.8 to 2.5. So on transmit they want it to be between 1.8 and 2.5, which it is. This still isn't right. It's now only transmitting at it isn't transmitting properly, so we need to address that in the rest of the lineup. And then on receive it's supposed to be 1.9 to 2.5. So the VCO is now set, but the transmitter is still not right. So remembering to go back to channel 20, nothing worse than doing a retune and you've left it on channel 1 or 40 from doing the VCO. So we want maximum, so we're still at 3.5 watts, which is there. We just need to bring it up half a watt, but it needs to be maxed out and then throttled back a bit. So let's make sure we're absolutely in the centre of the this could be what's wrong with what is wrong with it not doing all the channels properly. So that's covered those. I'm just going to go back to channel 40. It's not transmitting on channel 40. Oh, or 1. Now it's possible somebody's changed a capacitor in the VCO. Okay. This is normally the green tool. Not sure where our non-worn green tool is. This might be too worn. Yeah. So we've got the 4 watts back, well 3.5 watts back. Just adjust what I can. See, I can see there's a crack in that core. So that is max. That's not gripping. And that's broken. So, you know, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So I have to unsolder that white one. see if we can turn it round if there's enough of it left. Okay, so I've changed the core. I bought some off eBay, which has been recovered from scrap sets at $125 each. It sounds expensive, but that's sometimes what you have to do. So, oh, it's playing this not going into transmit properly again. Until I've got this tuned, I can't really go into that properly. There we go. So we've now got 4.5 watts. So we need to tune these for maximum. So that's maximum. That's maximum. That's now maximum. We'll just check we really are. So we're at 5 watts. Okay. So then the procedure is to rotate L4 clockwise to get 4.4 watts. That's L4. So when it decides to go back into transmit, there we go. Clockwise for 4.4 watts. And that's there. And then L9 is it? Anti-clockwise. They say for 3.8 watts, but of course we're going to do it for 4. And that way we should be pretty close between channel 1 and 40. Now of course until I've sorted out its shenanigans, I'm not going to be able to do this very easily. Now they may have changed some capacitors in the VCO in an attempt to make it lock easier, but in actual fact they've gone and made it worse, haven't they? Because we know the VCO's right, so we have to look into what else can have happened. So I think we need to do that. Now that transmitter final is tuned, I think we need to explore as to what's happened. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll go to the receiver now and just go through that, and then we'll end up with a snagging list. So we'll plug the extension speaker back in. And we'll go through the front end. So first of all, put the oscilloscope on, switch the bench light off, switch that through to the right camera, put an S9 equivalent signal on of 100 microvolts for a CB in the UK. And then we'll adjust the detector, see whether that's maximum recovered audio or whether we can improve it. Oh yeah, thought it sounded a bit too weedy. There we are. That's going to sound better. And now we'll set the SINAD meter to about 4 decibels. Put the bench light back on. Just whip through the front end. You've got the extra receive circuit in these. Now somebody's put a crystal filter in, but it must be working alright. Otherwise it wouldn't be receiving as well as it is. So we'll leave that alone, even though I don't like modifications at all. Well, that's certainly spot on. That's Mr. Chippy sneezing, if you heard that. Put a bigger signal on, do these IFs. and then we'll just check these front end ones again. Put the biggest signal on for that other one. I think that's about as good as we're going to get, and we're now reading what? Well, you know what, I think we have got a slight improvement. Let's have a look. Okay, 0.32. Yeah, right, well, it was 0.35, it's now 0.32. So to be honest, it was spot on, wasn't it? And with a sensitivity like that, so we'll look at it at 10 dB. So it's 0. I'll change scales. .28 for 10 dB, and for 20 it's about 0.86 microvolts for 20 dB. So yes, it's excellent. So I need to sort out why it's not always wanted to go into transmit. I say the circuitry's probably been messed with, and I'll just have to get a magnifying glass and see that capacitor looks like it's been changed, which would be the kind of thing that happens to try and stretch that VCO, but I think they've unstretched it because it's not even working on the 40 channels. So let's look at the S meter. We'll go back to an S9 signal, and it's just under the 9, so we'll just pop that into position. There's the S meter adjustment, and there's our 9. We'll just check the RF gain was at full. That's probably the deliberate fault. And now we'll look at the squelch. So put the squelch to full, and we're already at 100 microvolts, so it should be coming in at that. So we'll just adjust that so that it is coming in. And now we'll check it at the other end. So we'll switch the signal generator to standby. Let's put this on the attenuator controls. So we're parked at 0.3 of a microvolt. I mean, that's coming in beautifully. Hear it right down to 0.1 of a microvolt. So we'll switch the signal generator to standby. Set the squelch to threshold. Switch the signal generator back on. Coming in about 1.2 microvolts, disappearing off at 0.9. I'd like it better than that. Just see if I can set it more. They're not the best squelch in the world on this board. Just be a bit more meticulous. Let's try again. That's better. It's coming in now at 0.4 of a microvolt and disappearing off at about 0.18 of a microvolt. So if you fiddle well enough, it works fair enough. So what does that leave us to do? Well, everything else I think is on the transmitter. We've got the deviation to do. If we can persuade it to go into transmit again, we can persuade it to go into transmit. It's in a good mood. So see if we can do the deviation. Wow! Oh my goodness! Just look at this. Wallow! It's doing 4.5 dB. Hello! I'm on 3 channels at once. I am. How daft is that? I think some people set these up listening on a Fidelity 1000. Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. So we'll just, the Mikey Gainy one is in the right position. We'll just pop this down to something. It's actually on full. How stupid is that? Let's see whether that's okay. 1 to 1 to Wallow, spot on. 2.2 to 2.5 absolute maximum. That's where he wants it. Low power. So on low power, should be doing 400 milliwatts. Because it doesn't want to go back into transmit, does it? So 400 milliwatts. What am I telling you? I've gone and set it for 4 watts. I better recheck that. That's 400 milliwatts. That's full power. That's 400 milliwatts. Change scales. And there we go. So we now want to just look at the RF meter to see whether it's anywhere near, if it's going to not play up. Right, there we go. So let's see what the meter says. And it says 5 watts. Well, it isn't doing 5 watts. So we'll adjust that preset so it reads, well, that's the lowest it goes. So that's what it reads, just under. Obviously it should be about there, but in this case it isn't playing ball, it's just slightly over. Anyway, pretty meaningless anyway, but at least they do have a real power meter on these sets. So we're going to call it a day on this for this evening, and I'll start again on it tomorrow, and I'll start going through some of these capacitors to see what's causing the radio to not always wanting to go into transmit. So the next day, what I discovered when I started to take some of the wiring out from the illegal modification is at this point between here and there has been cut, and the switch which had been pressed into service to switch between the UK and the EU channels, the second pole of it did something with this, must have made it or removed it. So just try and see where that is. What does it actually do? So we can see it's the second track in. So the second track in 3 is effectively test point 1. So it looks like it removes capacitor 7 from resistor 4. So resistor 4 is there, capacitor 7 and resistor 11 are there. So what does that do? This is the proper service manual for the set, rather than the capacitor 7 is there. Capacitor 7, resistor 11. I don't see what they've done there. I don't know what the effect would be, but I think this is why it was being dodgy yesterday, because that was not there. I mean, at some time in its life it's had a wrong channel selector put in, but it works, you know. It's a bit of a rat's nest, but it works. And I have just checked that there's no imminent short circuits there. Well, this has been on all morning, and it's transmitting every time. Low power, yep. High power, yep. Deviation, wallow, yep. So the only thing is, I don't have to do this, but as a courtesy I will. I'll have a go anyway. And that's to rewire the HF filter back into operation. Now what I've already done is I've located one of the wires. The second thing we've got to do is put a capacitor. So I've now got this wire in position, which is basically a common, which starts off at pin 2 of the mic. So capacitor 213 is going to be missing, and it goes in to the far end of capacitor 202, sorry 212, which goes to tone control. So 212 was 0.01, 213 is 5600 picofarads. So we've got to find if the wire's still there, and then find a capacitor. I don't know if we've got that in stock. Anyway, it's looking promising. So I'll get back to you when we've, if and when I've done a bit more to it. Oh, so now wasting more time on Monday. I've done what I could on that filter switch, but they've cut the board and cracked the board away so badly, and it's so difficult to get to. I don't want to be taking the front panel off, so that's going to stay with it not doing anything. If I just show you, you've got the tone control, and that does an instant tone position, but it just mutes it. There's 6 connections on there, and they've all been severed. I've tried to put 2 back, which I thought was sufficient, but aren't. So there we go. What else have we got to do? We're just going to check the SWR feature on it. So key up, and how do we work this? Calibrate. So calibrate, calibrate, calibrate. Where's that? Oh, there it is. SWR. And it's reading 1 to 1, which is what we're expecting. The radio's still doing the power, it's still doing the deviation, it's still receiving. So I think we can button it up now. I will just put the aerial on it. So we'll finish this video off. We'll do an on-the-air test later. Then I'll leave it on overnight and make sure it's still working in the morning. You just never know if there's something happened on this around the phase lock loop for them to implement the silly modification. And you know, like with that link which I later discovered when I was having difficulty getting it to transmit. So we're now on the aerial, and I think it's something like 1.7 SWR. So let's see what it reads on this meter. Try and move the camera across. So calibrate, check. Yeah, 1.5 or something. That's I can accept that. Right, we'll put the bottom lid on, and is that the one I lost all the screws to? No, I didn't lose the screws to the bottom lid. I lost the screws to the top lid. Right, so there we are, all back together. Lids on. Just move the camera. Trouble with it, it's so big. Bench isn't really designed for sets this big. Just widen the picture a bit. Okay, here goes. 1 and a Roger. Local farmers. 1 on the Roger. Okay, well that's nothing different, is it? It's so many days since I did this, I've forgotten where we were with the sensitivity. But I know it was something like 0.32, so it's going to be pretty good. So we're doing on the air test with this later on, and so apart from the HF filter button, that's all working. But people will wreck these things, and I'm surprised that people allowed them to wreck them when these were £369 in 1982. But there you are, that is the Midland 76900, brought back from the silliness of having a 80 channel modification that had actually stopped the radio from working properly, as well as it being illegal. So, thanks for watching.